All better?
Perfect. Perfect.
Perfect. All right. I think I've turned off all the notifications so we won't be interrupted. Let me minimize this. I apologize. It's been a little while since I've used Zoom. We're used Teams quite a bit, and I'm not as used to it just from a UI perspective as I used to be. So I'm going to share my desktop. On my desktop, I'm going to open this up.
And we see it.
Perfect. And just make it full screen. Go into presentation mode. All right. Wrong slide. So, uh, I'll be honest with you guys. I always struggle when doing these presentations because, on one hand, I have to kind of gauge how much you care about the underlying technology and what's going on from like a purely tactical perspective and how it impacts your business without boring you to death with the nuts and bolts of why it is the way that it is. And so if I start boring you, just shake your head and look away, and I'll know that you're signaling me to just move on. Um, two words on who I am. So I spend about 20 years in large corporate IT environments. I worked for probably the closest industry to yours. I worked for Boston Properties for several years, and a couple of others in the commercial real estate space. I worked for Cressa Global, which is a commercial real estate brokerage, and there's a project management group there and stuff like that. So I'm moderately familiar with the space, although not probably obviously as well as you are. I was in venture capital for a few years, but generally speaking, and this is going to be kind of a recurring theme here, is we see a inflection point in the industry, right? And whenever there's an inflection point in any industry, there's an opportunity. And what's happening is technology throughout my career, throughout my life, really, was kind of a utility, right? You had your guy in the back room and there was a server and the server had a file server and it worked or it didn't work, right? But generally speaking, it's something you had to have, just like you had to have electricity and water, but it didn't really contribute to driving value and free cash flow for the business, frankly. That is changing in the last 2, 3 years, and it's changing fast and it's changing across various industries. To go back a tiny bit, I'll just mention that I built a pretty large managed services and consulting firm for the hedge fund and private equity industry. And so there I got to interact with, a variety of use cases for technology. And the reason that we spun off and are doing Alleron is because we see what's happening. And it was in Houston 2 weeks ago. I talked to a Gartner guy. Gartner is like a, almost like a McKinsey of research in our industry. And I said, am I right? Am I seeing what I'm seeing? He goes, we don't like to talk about it because it scares people, but you're absolutely correct. And what's happening is a kind of a dichotomy, right? Of those who are aware of the technological advantages, whether they are direct, meaning like if I do this with this kind of technology, I will save X amount of dollars, uh, indirect, which is more difficult to measure, which is if I do this, then my people will be more efficient. How much more efficient? It's very difficult to assess like how much faster they will work, which is we'll get back to that in a moment with the AI stuff. Um, or opportunity cost. This is kind of what I refer to as opportunity cost, which is what happens if like all my data gets encrypted and I can't work for several days. That's an opportunity cost. Like you probably don't want that, but you're never going to see a direct ROI on that. It's just an opportunity cost, right? And so this has started to translate to every industry, including yours. And for the rest of the conversation, what I would like to do, for the sake of kind of being brief, but also kind of very clear, there is now two areas that the tech that you use falls into. And the tech is table stakes, things that like if you don't have it, you're already kind of behind the rest of your competitors, and stuff that's emerging that is really really cool, but you're not behind because nobody else is really caught on to it yet, for the most part, right? And so um, I'll say just a few words in case you guys are not cloud experts, which um, you don't need to be for this conversation, but it might be useful. There are a couple of advantages to using cloud, and when I say cloud, I'm going to refer exclusively to Azure. The reason that I'm referring to Azure is because the other thing that we've seen is a shift away. Amazon actually was the first mover in the cloud space, but they are very prevalent in like tech startups and very large enterprise. Everywhere in between, Microsoft has completely outmaneuvered them. And again, I'll try to touch on that in a moment, but there is no rhyme or reason to talk about Google or Amazon in this conversation. Just take my word for it for now. So where I was going with this is um, cloud is basically two categories, right? You have your Microsoft Office, which is online. You host your email, you have Teams, and so on, but you don't manage any of that. And then there is the more intricate parts of the cloud where you have maybe you move your file server into the cloud, your application servers into the cloud, and they are running effectively in somebody else's data center, or they've already, if you're kind of up to date, they've been transformed and now they're running as kind of just containers and you can scale them up and down. The point is, it is much, much less management. It's self updating for, as far as feature sets. Remember, I don't know if you guys remember, but like back in the bad old days, you had your Exchange server, which ran all your email. And that Exchange server, every couple of years, needed to be updated. And some guy would come and he would spend the whole weekend in your office. And, he would, be all like tired and stressed out and say, it's not going well. I'm trying my best. That's all gone. Like that does not exist in the cloud. In the cloud, it's all self-managed, self-updating, and disaster recovery is kind of point and click, right? Like I remember like when you had to install custom software and configure it, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Now disaster recovery is built into the product. You can, if it's not working in one region where your kind of primary data resides, you can fail it over to a different region in 15 minutes or so. It's pretty stress-free, pain-free, but it's also pay as you go. So you hire more people, you pay a little bit more. Maybe don't use the resources that you were using. You can basically not just
This
on a.
meeting is being recorded.
You guys hear that?
Yes, I just
All right.
muted.
Okay. So the elasticity of that works in a couple of different ways, including paying like per user licenses for email, but also you have a server and that server needs to grow. You don't need to go buy a new server anymore. You just shut it off, resize it, virtually with a few clicks, and it's now a bigger server. In 5 minutes or less, you can turn it back on. You're back in the race, right? If you don't have that, you're behind those who do, right? And that part of the stack is broken into a couple of different components. Again, shake your head if you're not interested in this, but there is, Teams, which is, it was initially not well received. People are like, well, it's not a good product. It's much better now. They've redesigned it, and it's included in pretty much every Microsoft license out there. So if you're still paying for Slack, if you're still paying for other video conferencing services, I'm not going to name names, you might want to look at, why am I paying twice, and consider making a change. Um, Again, it's all in there. All these things that are on this particular screen are all in there. There's a lot of optional features that some are included in, for instance, business license, and some aren't. But generally speaking, we see a lot of advantages in stacking things around the Microsoft Modern Workplace suite. Um, so OneDrive for your file storage, Outlook, and Exchange Online, they integrate well, and this is by design, right? Microsoft wants your money, and so they work very, very hard to integrate their products together so that you don't go and buy Dropbox and start using Dropbox instead of, let's say, OneDrive, for instance. And they do have considerable advantage, like we edit documents together all the time, especially spreadsheets. And my partner is in a different city, and we look at the same spreadsheet, and I can see him moving the mouse and pointing to what he's doing, and so on and so forth. That only works with documents that are on OneDrive. That will not work with if you save it somewhere else or on a file server. That's just kind of an example for you guys to understand what I'm driving at. But again, consolidation around their ecosystem will save you money. And if you're not doing it, you should look at what you have that could potentially be moved to the Microsoft stack. And if you're already entitled to it, which again, in all probability, you already are. I'm going to try to move things along. This is the more fun conversation because especially in certain industries, especially in yours, there's a fair need for easy mobility. And the virtual desktop thing, some of you may remember old school, VDI that was mostly Citrix, a little bit of VMware, but it was problematic. It was never quite stable. No one before until now, no one ever got it quite right. And so you either had to hire somebody who had like a PhD in how to getting the virtual desktop stuff to work reliably without being slow or laggy or not being able to connect all of a sudden for some reason. That's all gone with Microsoft's implementation because they control the whole stack from like storage to the network to everything to the way you connect to it. And I thought about including it, but I'll just tell you about it. It's extremely, extremely easy to use. I'm not going to show you the video, but we have a video where it's basically one-click connection, so you don't even have to type the password. It's Microsoft has technology called passwordless, so you get a notification on your phone. You get a number. Your screen says what number is on your phone. You say it's number 96, and that's it. You're connected to your desktop. Now imagine what it means is you can connect from anything. You can connect from your friend's computer while you're visiting them. You can connect from an iPad. I use it from an iPad all the time. It's extremely convenient. It's a small thin iPad, and people actually had this true story. Somebody saw it over my shoulder and said, "You're running Windows on an iPad? How are you doing that?" I'm not. It's remote. It's virtual, but it's very forgiving. You don't need a lot of bandwidth. You don't. I have a video of me using it on a plane, and so on and so forth. The nice thing about virtual desktop, aside from convenience, is as long as it can launch the client, you don't need to buy a new PC, right? So if you're looking at your capital costs every 3-4 years, you don't need to buy people, new laptops. You can go for like the cheapest, maybe even used iPad that can launch the client, connect over pretty much any cellular connection, and they'll be able to use a full desktop wherever they are, right? Wherever they're traveling to, on site, with the client, what have you. It doesn't matter. So it's extremely, extremely forgiving. The other thing is, of course, it's pay as you go. So you want more virtual desktops? No problem. You want fewer? No problem. And it is very inexpensive. Most like average size virtual machine is somewhere around about $100 a month, give or take. And again, that's offset by the fact that you don't need to buy a new $1,000, $2,000 laptop for them. You can buy them. They can even use their own if they already have something. And of course, if the device itself is lost, doesn't matter. There's nothing on there. There's no financial data. There's no quotes on there. There's nothing on there. We don't care. And finally, again, this may mean nothing to you guys, but whenever we had clients or in the corporate world, we had VPN. VPN is a very scary thing, right? It's nice. It's convenient for you guys to connect, but you're basically connecting two networks. And if you're connecting your home network or your hotel network or whatever, all sorts of bad things can come across into the environment where you don't want them to be. With virtual desktop, you don't need that anymore. That you don't connect any networks. It's just passing, screen refreshes and keystrokes across your connection, but bad stuff can no longer jump across. So it's a great solution. I recommend it. You can obviously, it's very easy to kind of try it before you fully commit to it, but it's pretty cool. We have over 1,000 users that we support now, and again, true story, you can believe me or not, not a single one said, yeah, this thing sucks. I want to go back to using a regular desktop. I actually firmly believe that this is kind of like the inevitable future, right? Like, just like we can probably assume that like at some point all cars will be self-driving. I don't think anyone will have like a local laptop anymore the way that people used to use it. Most likely scenario is people will have their phone. There'll be some sort of a dock. You put it next to, a screen, you put it on a dock, and you connect to your virtual desktop, and that's how everyone will be working in a couple of years. Because, but you can already do it. Just FYI, I can already connect off my iPhone. It's just a matter of having the right cable to connect to a screen and a keyboard. Moving on. The place where we see the most demand right now, because remember, guys, at the end of the day, I run a business just like most of you, and so I need to understand what the marketplace wants, and kind of cater my marketing and sales efforts to that. Is data insight, data analytics, knowing exactly what's going on with all sorts of KPIs at any point in time. And that part of it is surprisingly simple. As long as your data lives somewhere where we can get to it, in a SQL database, in a vendor that has API access, which pretty much everyone does at this point, we can pump that data into a Power BI dashboard, and you can slice and dice that thing in any way that you can imagine. Whatever comes to mind, we can do it. And the data is self-updating. You don't need any heavy lifts with like ETL, doesn't matter, but like complicated mechanics to export the data and push it back in. 99% of the time, unless you're using something truly archaic, we can connect to it in near real time, and you can click through it. If you have a touch screen, you can literally click in the charts and move stuff up and down, left and right, and see everything on demand in real time. Which, like I said, especially the Power BI stuff, which is fairly easy to implement, kind of low barriers to entry, very, very popular right now. If you don't have that kind of reporting, think about kind of what you want it to look like. um, Happy to answer any questions, not necessarily on this call, but whenever you want. The best and my favorite topic is, of course, AI. It's my favorite because we get a lot of engagement with AI, where current clients, sometimes new clients, come and say, we want to do AI. I'm like, that's great. What do you want to do? We don't know. I'm like, well, it's a business question. It's not a technology question, right? And so I'll give you a couple of examples and I'll try to explain it. And then again, like I can't I can only kind of explain what it is and what it isn't. How it applies to your specific use case is up to you. I just want to be kind of blunt and upfront about that. So first of all, AI is a highly misunderstood concept in the corporate context, in the business context, right? Like, I use it all the time, but I use it for like, it's basically my like encyclopedia now, right? Like, I ask it questions about anything that comes to mind. If you have a Tesla, it's pretty cool because it now has like a button for Grok, and you can, I drive my kids to school, and whatever we're talking about, I'm like, what year did like Archimedes die in or something? Tell me more about Archimedes. Like, but this is not the AI we're talking about. We're talking about a completely different AI, which is AI that can give you business outcomes. And to give you business outcomes, it is once again a data conversation, right? Because for AI to be able to help you either gain efficiencies or, more interestingly, actually produce things, you need to train it on your data. And so what we do 80% of the time on AI projects is we take data and we have to then normalize that data so AI understands. Remember, there's no such thing. There's no AI. It's basically a computer that's learning patterns, right? Like, LLM is a pattern recognition system that's very, very good, and it seems almost sentient, but it isn't. And so we train it on the data, And when we train it on the data, you can do some pretty magical stuff on it. For instance, I'll give you a pretty, hopefully, an example you'll find really cool. Um, I For lunch, I met with a client of mine. They're a very large private equity firm, and they took all of their previous deal memos. This is just part of the project, but this is the part I can talk about. Everything else is NDA. And they fed it into the LLM. They trained the LLM. Then they connected it to their Salesforce, their CRM, and they trained it on the data that's in there. It basically, they combined all this data in the research data and some external data, but they rated that data saying this is a fact, this is an opinion, this is a fact, this is an opinion. Otherwise it's going to, otherwise it's going to give you all sorts of garbage, right? The end result, after a fair amount of effort, about 5 months of effort, is it can now write private equity deal memos. And when I say it can write deal memos, they're indistinguishable from, a first year, like Harvard grad student writing your deal memos. It does the thesis, it does industry analysis, it does comps, it does financials, it even projects in private equity. What they do is they try to speculate on how they're going to then like exit and sell the company, right? And my expectations were pretty low. I'm like, this is going to be something that someone is then going to have to sit there and be like, oh, this is stupid. We're going to have to clean this up and delete this. No, 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 no. It produces fully baked 10, 15-page deal memos that are at least as good as human, potentially better. The best part is you can ask it for different perspectives. You can say, well, write it with perspective of like, we're going to take this business unit and we're going to carve it out, but keep the other one and merge it with another similar company and runs the scenarios and the financials on that, and it'll do all that. It saves an incredible amount of time, and it allows them to do more deals, much more deals a year, right? Because remember, like any business, there's pipeline. They're looking at 30, 40 deals. They weed out the stuff that's not going to work, that is not financially viable, that is not in their wheelhouse for whatever. Like there's all sorts of reasons. Legal diligence, right? Again, I'm trying not to delve too much into stuff that's like heavily NDA, but like it does all their legal diligence now, and it's not a small task, right? This is like usually a giant army of outside lawyers looking through this stuff and making sure that they're not going to be caught in a quagmire of some sort of lawsuits after they acquire the company. There's a lot of angles to it. It can do like 80% of that stuff. Um, so I would, I would humbly volunteer that in your industry, training it to write proposals and to even fully automate the stuff where all you have to do is, scroll through and say, looks good, send. Um, it should be a very easy lift. But again, to get that output, you need training data, right? So you need to give it your last few years of like, I'm just using proposals as an easy example of proposals, fine tune it, and again, there's all sorts of mechanisms that go into tuning it. And well, on the other side, you should be able to completely automate a lot of the stuff that you probably do manually today. I'm going to pause here to take a breath. Um, and I would love to answer some questions if you have any.
Yeah, definitely. Heidi, you always have questions. And you're muted. Okay.
I know. I am so interested in looking at this. And so I guess, and it if you covered this, Gene, forgive me, because I was really trying to take in everything that you were saying and what was there,
I talk
but
fast.
how, can you, for some of us who are out there who maybe are not contractors,
Yeah.
who maybe have media groups or maybe have consulting groups or distributors or whatever, can talk a little bit about how this works for some the companies outside of because I understand the estimating and having everything there, but when you went into the BI dashboards, I just really perked up. I was really interested.
Yeah, well, let's do it backwards. And I apologize. I actually knew that you guys are not all, I tried to have some sort of a common denominator
Yeah,
from an
I'm just curious. Yeah.
industry perspective, which was tricky. But can you give me an example of what kind of data you are using, what you're using it for, and ultimately what is the kind of the business output of that data, like what you're doing with it, and I can probably come up with some examples for you.
Oh, that's such a good question.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
No.
See
Yeah.
what I mean? No, don't. This is totally normal. This happens a lot, and I'm like, well, what
Gene,
would you like it to do?
Yeah.
Gene, I
Yeah,
think
I mean,
I'm sorry, Heidi.
go ahead, Adam.
I was just gonna say, Gene, I think this is fascinating. I'm a big believer of the fact that this changes. We have become steeped in software of how we run our businesses. And so we are actually, this is the freeing aspect of you can go create any way to do business that you want to do
Mhm.
because of building these. And so I think I've got, somewhere I don't know, 36 or something software pieces that I've built that are all I'm starting to interconnect together within my business. So I'm curious about your virtual because I've been using my desktop with a standard drive, a 4 terabyte standard drive at home as my Chrome mirror to be able to get back into it. And so your virtual desktop, I'm curious on the space and the storage and the speed upgrades and that sort of thing. If you could talk a little bit about that with the working remote or the virtual capabilities going back and forth there.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So it is effectively just like any virtual machine, which means it is, from a consumption perspective, looks and feels like a physical machine. I use a virtual desktop for 6 years, or at least 5 years, and I don't notice that it's somewhere else, right? It doesn't. It's not slow. There's no delay. It doesn't. I know that's not what you asked, but there's no noticeable difference in performance. As far as sizing it, it's purely pay for, you pay for what you use, and it's pretty cheap. So if you, and I'll try to cover different permutations of it, right? They're usually they're pre-packaged in the CPU and memory and disk size. So it's, oh, I want two CPUs and 16 gigs. That's one SKU, and then you drop down into a bigger one, bigger one. However, just from a disk storage perspective, what you were asking about, like how much their disk storage costs are like comically small. So I don't remember it off the top of my head. You'll have to forgive me, but a terabyte is like $25 a month or something like that, maybe $22 a month. So you can just add storage to your virtual desktop. The other nice thing that most people don't fully appreciate until they try it is you can connect to it. Like I said, you can connect it from anywhere, and it's the way you left it, right? So if you were vibe coding a bunch of stuff and you had Windows open, it's exactly like that, right? You come back and look, there it is. All right, keep working and go somewhere else, go home, connect, same desktop, looks and feels exactly the same way.
Are there a lot
So
of API points to doing like cloud connection on it, or are you running standard drives on those? So are you buying virtual space where you would have to go do calls, or is it hardware? Like, is it a hard disk?
for all intents and purposes, it acts and feels just like a disk physically attached to your PC. It's
Okay.
just you open up, it looks, again, it feels like Windows, it looks like Windows. Everything is exactly, it is Windows. There's no difference. It's running Windows. It's just running it somewhere else, and you're just connecting to it across the internet. But, if you add a disk to it and you click Explorer, there's a terabyte disk. It's your it's not your operating system disk, it's like a second disk called, whatever you name it. It's 1 terabyte. Tomorrow you need 2 terabytes. You shut off your VM, you go into the sizing thing, and you change it from 1 to 2. You hit apply and you turn your VM back on. Now it's a 2 terabyte disk. And that's really the beauty of cloud, is we can do that not just with virtual desktops, we can do it with servers, with anything. It's all on demand.
Okay. Appreciate that. I might give you a call later.
Sure, of course.
I just dropped Jean's email address in the chat for those that may want to follow up later. Any other questions right now from this group?
There was one in the there was something in the chat.
Oh, that was from Ben. Imagine a Power BI dashboard that aggregates social media analytics with web traffic and revenue from sponsored posts. Ooh, Power BI is great at pulling data from disparate systems like HubSpot, your ERP, and web services. So Power BI could get like our Google Analytics and pull it into a dashboard.
Yeah, I know for a fact that Google has an API that exposes that stuff. Again, as long as there's a mechanism to connect to the data, you could pull any data, and again, there are two pieces to it, right? Getting the data, and then there's a fairly comprehensive way to what I call slice and dice that data, is essentially put it into a dashboard and how you want to arrange it and what you want to compare it with, and how you want to kind of look at it in combination with other information sources. But yeah, of course.
I have one question, and I'm thinking about what your question to me was. And so I guess my question is, I'm thinking about productivity.
Mhm.
And I guess this could go for manufacturing, for distribution, or for a media group like us. And so if we're looking at tracking productivity of our employees and
Mhm.
what they're getting done, I mean, that could pull from what we're doing in Microsoft Word, or I mean, in Microsoft, or our whole Microsoft thing, into this Power BI dashboard. Is correct?
It
And then
could,
we're looking and
yes,
seeing.
it can do that. It actually, this is kind of a topic that Microsoft used to talk about, and they kind of stopped. But there are a lot of mechanisms already built into the Office 365 platform that measure productivity, right? And it's anything from when you logged in to how many emails you send to, there's a bunch of stuff that can already measure how active you were during the day.
Big brother.
Yeah, that's why they kind of stopped advertising it, because
Yeah.
a lot of people didn't appreciate that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, like, we run into this occasionally where, like, for instance, very easy, and it's actually on by default. It tracks location where you logged in from. I'll give you a true story. I had a BDR firm that I had hired to see if outsourced BDR works, and um, about a month into it, I said, "So you guys, we contracted. In my contract, it says that I'm paying for a U.S. based BDR, right? Right. Why is the traffic coming from rural Mexico?" Like, whoa, 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 what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, here, look, I have all the logs, right? I see where the person's logging in from, and they're logging in from rural Mexico. So all that stuff was already there. You just have to know where to find it.
Nice. Any other questions? If you think of one later, grab Gene's email address out of the chat, and you
Yep.
can always send him a message and continue the conversation. Gene.
Yeah, guys, I'm not disappearing. Feel
Yeah.
free to reach out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was really informative and educational, and a good I think look at how you can leverage things you already have maybe and that you're using every day, and how to take it to the next level. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help.
All righty.
All right. Thanks, guys.